I marathoned every single classic 2D Mario remake, and I decided to rank each and every one of them to see what the best of the bunch can teach us about games development. Because even though I've played through the original releases of all of these games multiple times, these remakes are completely new to me. I started out with Super Mario All-Stars for the Super Nintendo, which gets brownie points immediately for being 4 games in one, but loses a lot of those brownie points thanks to its weird physics. The versions of Super Mario Bros. 1 through 3 and the Lost levels here are full-blown remakes of the games, and the physics do not map one-to-one with the original releases. I think this is mostly because they tried to have Mario's movement physics be uniform across the 4 games in the package, and while I can understand them wanting to find that balance, it leads to almost all of these games feeling pretty strange to play. It's not a deal breaker by any means, but it definitely keeps these versions of the games from being anywhere above B tier. I have to give credit to the presentation here though. All of these games look great in Super Mario All-Stars. The visual styles of Mario 2 and 3 were retained pretty well, but they both received lots of extra detail that really make the visuals pop. Mario 3 is still very clearly Mario 3, for example, but it looks so much better than it did on the NES. Mario 1 and the Lost levels, on the other hand, have had complete overhauls to the visuals, and I'm a little bit torn here. I don't know if it's just because every single Mario fan game used this exact style for a while back in the late 2000s, but this visual style can end up feeling a bit out of place to me. There's nothing actually wrong with it, but comparing it to the original releases and how faithful the styles of Mario 2 and 3 are in this package, I find myself feeling that this style lacks charm. The same definitely cannot be said for the music though. Oh my god, I love the style of the music in Mario All-Stars. Moving on from Super Mario All-Stars, we have Super Mario All-Stars plus Super Mario World. This is fundamentally the exact same package as base Mario All-Stars, but it includes Super Mario World. Instant A tier. The version of Super Mario World here is pretty unique too. It didn't receive quite the same overhaul as the other games, because this collection released on the Super Nintendo not long after Super Mario World originally released, so it didn't really need it. But this game does feature completely unique sprites for Luigi, who in the original version of Super Mario World was just a recolored Mario. Not enough to knock this version up into S tier, but still a cool addition. Now moving on from Super Mario All-Stars, we have Super Mario All-Stars. Again! Super Mario All-Stars was re-released on the Nintendo Wii for Mario's 25th anniversary. This version has me so torn. It doesn't change a single thing from the original Super Nintendo release, but it does come with a lot of cool things in the box to celebrate the series' big milestone. I think ultimately though, this ranking is based on the game itself, which is just the Super Nintendo version with no changes. Not even the Super Nintendo controller in the pause menu was changed to be a Wii remote, and it's the version of All-Stars that doesn't include Super Mario World. D tier. Okay, finally moving on from Super Mario All-Stars, we have the fact that this video was sponsored by me, reminding you that I have a Patreon page. For as little as £2 a month, you can get access to Patreon exclusive rewards, all while helping fund these videos. There are 3 tiers to choose from. The Talk to Rogue tier, where you get access to an exclusive Discord server where you'll get to see behind the scenes tidbits, receive exclusive updates, and chat to myself and other members. There's the Gorget Rogue tier, where you get access to the Discord server and early previews of every single video I release. And finally, there's the Stalk Rogue tier, where you get all of the perks of the previous tiers, as well as an exclusive monthly podcast where I chat about the near and distant future of the channel. All patrons are listed in the description of my videos, and any level of support is hugely appreciated, but far from mandatory. If you want to help support this channel and become a Super Rogue All-Star, head over to the top link in the description and become a member today. Now, Super Mario Bros. Deluxe is a difficult one to rank for me. This version of the game adds cutscenes, saves, challenge mode, a single-player versus mode, you versus Boo, a multiplayer versus mode, and collectibles, whilst giving players the first ever portable version of the 1985 classic. These are some killer additions to a remake of such an iconic game, so you may be wondering why it's so hard for me to place it in our tier list. Due to the tiny screen size of the Game Boy Color, keeping the sprites to the same size they were on the NES would have made it really difficult for players to actually see what was happening on screen. So Nintendo had to make a tough call when it came to the presentation of this game. Do we prioritize faithfulness? or playability. Having the sprites be larger and the game more zoomed in would make the game much easier to see, which is ultimately what Nintendo decided was the best move for this game's playability. But this had some unexpected consequences. The biggest, in my opinion, is not being able to see as far in front of Mario, as this can lead to enemies and obstacles only becoming visible when they're pretty much right in front of you. This adds a surprising amount of frustration to the game, because if you don't know this game like the back of your hand, you can very often be taken by surprise by what pops up. The additions made to this version of the game genuinely make me want to put it in S tier, but with the playability issues that this version introduces, I can't put it any higher than A tier. The Game Boy Advance is home to all of our remaining remakes, starting with the classic NES releases of Super Mario Bros. 1 and 2. This was a series of re-releases of a load of iconic NES games, and practically all of these games were nothing more than direct ports. These versions of Mario 1 and 2 are very easy for me to rank. F tier. Take one look at this gameplay and tell me you disagree. This just leaves us with the Super Mario Advance series, a set of 4 remakes that released throughout the GBA's life. Super Mario Advance Super Mario Bros. 2 was the first game in this series, and this is a bizarre version of Mario 2. For starters, the game's visuals are much brighter and quite desaturated, which I believe was done intentionally in an attempt to make visual elements pop a bit more on the poorly lit Game Boy Advance screen. This version also uses a lot more sprite manipulation techniques, such as squash and stretch, and all player characters, and a few bosses, all have voice lines now. This sounds like a great change to make, but in practice, here we go. Here I go. It can be quite annoying. All of these changes are pretty uniform across the whole Mario Advance series, and they all help give these games something of an uncanny feel to them. This version of Mario 2 is particularly strange to me though, because right out of the gate, there are some major and seemingly inexplicable changes made to the level design. I could be missing something, but there doesn't seem to be any actual reason for these changes to have been made. They're not even necessarily bad changes, but they are definitely confusing. All in all though, this is a solid version of Mario 2. A lot of its additions are cool in theory, but can get pretty annoying in their execution, so I'm putting it in C tier. Super Mario World Super Mario Advance 2 is much more interesting to me. It uses the Super Mario All-Stars Plus version of Super Mario World, which is also true of Mario Advance 1 and 4, but it definitely keeps things a lot more faithful to the source material than the first game in the series did. The only notable additions are the ability to switch between Mario and Luigi very easily, the latter of whom is equipped with his trademark slippery controls, and a couple of additional cutscenes. Other than that, this is pretty much just Super Mario World. Although I will say, the presentation for this one is really strange to me. It has the same brightness adjustments as the previous game, but it feels like it's way more extreme here. There are times at which Mario's eyes blend into his face because of how pale he is, and the overall feel of the game is a bit off. There are also screen elements that just feel out of place. Like, why are Mario and Luigi's heads cut off here? That would have been such an easy thing to fix. Ultimately, these little issues don't detract from the game too much, and I'm quite happy to put it in B tier. Yoshi's Island Super Mario Advance 3 is a difficult one to rank, in the sense that it's not really a Mario game. I personally consider the classic 2D Mario games to be Super Mario 1 through 3, World, Land, and Land 2. And while Yoshi's Island is technically Super Mario World 2, I don't think I'm going to count it in my rankings here, which just leaves us with Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Bros. 3. This one is fascinating to me. It very much falls in line with the rest of the Advance games, very faithful to the original, excessive voice acting, but it also has what is effectively an entire new game's worth of content in the form of the e-reader levels. There's a good chance that even if you've played this version of Mario 3, you haven't played these 38 levels, as they were only available through the Game Boy Advance e-reader and the specific level cards you could scan with it. These levels are effectively an official Nintendo-made ROM hack of Super Mario Bros. 3, featuring completely unique level designs and loads of elements from other classic Mario games, like turnips from Mario 2 and charging chucks from Super Mario Mario World. This is an incredible addition to this game. I take massive issue with the fact that in the initial release of this game, these levels are extremely difficult to access, and in some regions, completely inaccessible. And while these levels are available on the Wii U Virtual Console and Nintendo Switch Online releases of this game, I can't in good faith put this game in S tier. I want to, I really want to, but I have to cap it at a high A. So that brings us to the all-important question of which of these remakes is the best of the bunch. It's Yoshi's Island Super Mario Advance 3. Perfectly faithful to the original, lower saturation leads to a pastel color scheme that works wonders for this game's style, Remix soundtrack is really unique and cool, and the voice acting is the least intrusive here. In all seriousness though, Super Mario Advance 4 Super Mario Bros. 3 is far and away the best classic Mario remake, even if only because of the e-reader content. So, what can we learn from these games? This is a really interesting discussion point to me because, as aspiring developers, we will likely never be remaking iconic games such as these. So I really had to think outside the box to derive some generally applicable lessons from these games. Lesson 1, consider hardware limitations thoroughly. This is admittedly less important in the modern gaming landscape, but considering the capabilities of the hardware you're developing for is absolutely essential to ensuring the highest quality experience possible. You shouldn't try and force the hardware to do something it can't, and you should heavily consider whether or not certain gameplay elements or entire project concepts are worth trying to mold to the chosen hardware. Lesson 2, just because you can, doesn't always mean you should. This one is somewhat related to the concept of less is more. Just because you can include something in your game, such as voice clips for example, doesn't always mean that the game will benefit from its inclusion. Before implementing a feature or a mechanic, you should heavily consider how it will interact with all of the other mechanics of the game, as well as the overall experience of the game, and you should consider whether or not the game is enhanced by this new feature. Lesson 3, reuse and remix. Just because you've used a concept in a previous game, doesn't mean it doesn't have merit in your new project. If you have a game project that you've worked on in the past, and you think of an idea from it that could be used in your new project, don't be afraid to give it a try. Combining the new with the old and thinking up brand new scenarios for a pre-existing gameplay concept can help enhance both elements. It can provide a fun new twist on an already great idea, and it can help improve the overall experience of your latest and greatest creation. I thought I'd ease us all into this new format with some less science-heavy conclusions, but next time I see you, we'll be diving into the psychology of the worst Animal Crossing game. So until then, be sure to check out my comprehensive guide on destroying your backlog, and I'll see you in the next chapter of my journey to let the games I've never played inspire the games I'm yet to make.